everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 21 of Season 3. How is everyone today? We've got some people hanging out. How is everyone? How is the weather? Hope it is going well. I heard there's some heat waves going around. But yeah, normal episode, not too much to announce today. We've been making progress on the gemstone things. So I wrote a script, and then my brother helped clean it up a bit. But I made a script to help make things plainer. It's been making those a lot easier. So that script is also going to be available on Patreon. And that's been good. And we got people hanging out. Yep. Anyway, start getting those questions ready. If you're linking, make sure we can see the artist or studio who made it. And if it's a video, call out the time code, because it's always awkward to open up a video and then go hunting around and be like, I don't know what they want. And then by the time the lag comes around, they're going to, maybe not be in the chat anymore, or, take some time to respond again. But yeah, Ricochet got released a couple of weeks ago. I've recorded a tutorial, but I haven't gotten to upload it yet, of making the webbing, like a very specific webbing, more methodically. And that scene file will also be available. But I think we're good to go. Yeah, let's start clicking links. I had nothing else to chat about. Go to the desktop so I don't accidentally miss it. And the Dean snuck in with the first question. He's always quick. Let's see what you got. Mute. And let's see what we got. This is from Zayzima, I'm assuming. Several things are happening. It's looping. Okay, there we go. So, I mean, there's a lot happening here. Do you have any specifics there, Dean? Because there's just madness happening. I guess it's mostly the concept of rotating to a new angle that's got like different projection mapping each time. Let's try and find a specific looping point. Yeah, see right there. I wish I could rewind here. I can't. There's a certain moment when everything suddenly gets projected. But are they textured from the front? No, they project onto the background. And then here, yeah, it kind of morphs into it. That's the one that trips me up. But anyway, I think we can extract the core concept from here and take a look at it. Let me think. We don't have a big complicated scene going on, but you're going to need something that has good UVs, because everything will need to get baked down at a certain point, I think. Yeah, I don't know. There could be a couple specifics that just aren't in my head. So why don't we just try tinkering around a bit and see what we can end up with. To start out with, I'll make a cube, delete the front faces, create another cube, throw this one into a cloner, clone onto an object. The object will be this one. Create a bunch of copies, so those will be kind of hanging out in the walls here. Add a bunch of randomness to the scale uniformly, absolutely. So those can get larger or smaller. I suppose we can do some position. Yeah, so that's sort of a little cubby environment. And let me think. How would I go about some of these specifics? I don't think, conceptually, I don't think it's too crazy. It's just you want to be methodical with the way you're building things. So I'll scale these up a bit so the figure can still be human-sized. I'd like it to be at 0. Okay, good enough. So there's the figure, and then these objects. Now, an immediate thought is I think the figure will, for simplicity, and we even saw it in the video where there's a lot of things were baked down, only like the head of the character was moving. So we're going to do the very simple version of this. Throwing that into a connect, don't weld. We'll need another connect, and I'll bake down this background. So that becomes a single model as well. So you can imagine that we're doing a particular camera move, and at a certain moment, that kind of gets stuck onto the background. And let's just go one step at a time. There'll probably end up being some redundancies, but let's make a camera. And we are now linked to the POV of the camera. And we'll even do some simple keyframing here. Not trying to make magical keyframes here that look super duper clean. But let's let that take a while to rotate. But yeah, and we'll even just leave it as a continuous motion. So if that were to be rotating around, we could say at a given moment, like let's say this moment, that anything that's happening suddenly gets plastered onto the background. Let's make a simple white material for the background, and we'll go absolutely ridiculous on this frontal one. And if this concept works, then maybe we can make a fancier version. But we'll project that onto this character. All of these have their own UVs, which may or may not work, but then I could probably do a frontal projection. I'm not sure. So here's a thought. Here's the camera, and at this particular moment, it looks the way that it does. So if I say, okay, camera, you at this time don't have your keyframes anymore, that camera's now just stuck there at frame 42. So making a brand new material, let's just call this cam map 1. That will get applied to, let's just say both of them. I'll apply it to both of them. And it is set to a camera mapping. The camera will be this one, cam map 1. So both of those get linked to cam map 1, and that should be projecting frontal based on that given projection. Of course, that gets like a feedback loop. That might look weird already. I'm gonna hit render. Let's just see what that looks like. Because I thought it'd maybe be crazier, but let's see. Cam map 1. Oh, actually, that makes sense. I didn't apply anything yet. So under luminance, I'm going to say that that is being, that is being fed a camera. So is that under effect? MoGraph camera shader. So here's the MoGraph camera shader, and inside there we link it to that camera as well. And there we go. Now something's happening. If I hit render, no. Oh, I guess if there's nothing there to start out with, let's do this carefully. Yeah, let me think. The first image needs to be absolute. And then I'm doing this camera projection here. Really, that's not necessary. It just needs to be frontal. But from the very first pass, from this particular camera map, oh, it looks like well, that one is there. Oh, a couple things I just did wrong. I'm going to delete camera map, make a duplicate of this. This one is now camera map 1. That one will lose all of its keyframes. I want to make sure that I don't move it away from this position. So I could just keyframe to override those. Actually, even better, I can add a recall from Rocket Lasso, a tool we make, but that's now stored that position. I can always jump back to it. So going back to this wandering camera, I can move off position. Now, I don't know if that's actually going to do anything here on this camera projection. Those, again, potentially we want to map it to camera 1. And in this one, we also want to map it to this new camera map 1, which we kind of broken. If I render, does it look like anything? No, it's still going to look black, but that's not surprising. So if we go back here and I go back to camera map 1, we can render out from this given perspective and then use that as the image to project. So that looks like at the time of 42, let's just do that. 42 is when we know the camera was supposed to lose its keyframe. Actually, it might not. Oh, come on. Let me go to a top view and make sure that the camera, yeah, it is 42. I just want to make sure that those were syncing up. So yeah, at frame 42, just kind of accidentally, coincidentally, that was the frame. I scale that to look like this point of view, which is just a 1280 by 720, which is the cinema default. I'm even just going to stay there. So that gets rendered out. And you see right now I'm just on these materials. We got a single generic light. If I hit render, we should see, yeah, the scene looks exactly as it does right now. So sending that out to the picture viewer, actually we should save as a whatever. We'll just say JPEG, and we'll save that into episode 21, scene files, new folder, TEX for texture. Cinema automatically will search inside that folder. And let's just call this cam map 1. Save, render. There we go. So that is now that image from that particular point of view. This is now projecting that one, but the cam map doesn't need this camera shader anymore. Now we just feed it that image. In order to have it not yell, I will save this as 0 or 1A cam map. Camera mapping. Okay, now let's feed in that image that we just rendered. Scene files, texture, image. Doop. Okay, so now that's there. And now instantly we do see something sort of happening there. We might have to make sure that it's scaled properly. Let's go back to our animated camera and move off of that frame. And now you're going to see that it's close, but it's not perfectly matching. Why is it not perfectly matching? This is a camera mapping, and there is a film aspect ratio, which is set to 4:3. I don't think we are on a 4:3, are we? Because let's find out what we need. We are at 1280 divided by 720. And so it's 1778 is the ratio. So let's go back to camera mapping and see if we make that be a thing. There we go. That's now matching pretty well. Okay, so now the idea being, since I took that image from a particular moment, you'll see that at a certain split second, this is going to sync up with the image because it's projected from the exact same location. So that looks correct, and then we move off of it. So then you have the option of, it was always like that, so we can move into position perfectly in that split second, and that is now correct. And we can move off of it, and we continue to see that material projected onto everything. You have the option of making these suddenly activate on that frame. So on 42, we'll say that the selection here, we'll keyframe that, and it will say, yeah, it's blank, which means that gets applied. If I go back exactly one frame, I can just put anything I want in here, just type in some gibberish. There is no tag called that, so it applies to nothing. So now suddenly in that moment, it's going to activate. So now you get this, it's kind of looking normal, and we play through, and then suddenly, boop, in that split second, it does now exist. And essentially, the concept is just to do this again and again and again and again, moving into continual new positions. And it looked like the animation had a lot of, hang on, we got some spam in the chat. Let me see if I can get rid of it. Boop. And boop. Okay, banned the chat bots. So yeah, you see this projection. Let's look back at the reference and see if there's some other specialty things going on. At a certain point, layering these up, you start going cross-eyed with what we're seeing. But yeah, so this zooms in on that, and then you suddenly see this rainbow. But it's like, I really wish we could scrub. But you can still see the rainbow projected, and it's in the back. Yeah, I don't know. This type of thing is in my head. I think mechanically we've talked about everything that is relevant. It just depends on when they turn on and when you take the picture of something. So there, it's really cool in that they keep on moving on and moving on to additional scenes. I guess I wonder if you could even, I wasn't thinking about it, but like right in this frame when it suddenly activates there, could we also hide the character? So could we take the figure and say, okay, on this previous frame, yes, it is there. And then we'll keyframe those. on frame 41. And on frame 42, say that that's actually off and off. So now he's going to look like he was three-dimensional. It's like, oh, look, he's there. And then suddenly, no, he would never. That's okay. So that was kind of a missing element there. So he's there, and then suddenly he's not there anymore. And you can imagine just as equally, conceptually, like we can go forward here, and then right as he lines up, suddenly he becomes real. So that's the, yeah, not hiding him was the missing bit I had there. So suddenly there, and not there. Ring, ring. So I'd say right there is the meat of the concept. Just rendering from your point of view right now. I'm happy it works directly in the viewport. And you can always, in the material, go to the viewport and say, I want to see the texture as, and we can say no scaling, so it'll be full res. So that should look a little sharper. Blink. Projected in. So yeah, just a perspective trick. Do that again and again and again, and you've got that animation we were seeing. And I thought we'd have to do some fancy UV mapping, but it's all frontal projections or flat projections. So that just works. And I had said that we might be able to do this as a frontal projection, but you couldn't. Doing this camera mapping seems like the right way to do it because a frontal projection would be moving no matter where we go, and you wouldn't want that. Pretty funky, though. It really does mess with your head perspective-wise. And like I said, going backwards, he becomes real. So, yeah, that's a fun little one. Thanks for the question. I'm not going to take that one any further because I think it would just be more and more and more of the same. Because, you know, just imagine that we keep the camera moving around even more, and then there's some other geometry here. We take another screenshot, reproject at a particular time, and it just becomes real again. Let's see. If you do frontal, can you pin the texture at this state? That's a fine question. Could we do that? So this is now saved as a completely unrelated question. I was doing this camera mapping, but let's say we were doing frontal. So selecting these, I'll say those are frontal projections. It shouldn't change the way it looks because it is a frontal projection from here. Can I lock that in is the question. And I don't know, but if we select both of them and say I want to, actually just right click on the material. We'll do it one at a time. Selecting this one material, I'm going to say I want to do a generate UV coordinates. Does that work on frontal? And I don't know. So let's generate those, and then here, right click, generate UV coordinates, and then we get those new coordinate tags. These other ones never were doing anything anyway. So now presumably, yeah, you see that this was frontal projection, but Cinema automatically set it to UVW once we generated it from that map. And I think there's still, yeah, there should still be keyframe to work. So there's a bit of a pop there. It is working, but something wasn't quite right. That's super weird. I'm not sure why that hand appears up there. But in general, kind of worked. It's not as good. A lot of it is almost as good. Yeah, I'm kind of confused to exactly what the case was. Pop, 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 pop. Yeah, not sure with the UVs, but that's the concept. Mick. Well, actually, that was a quick one on YouTube. Let me see if there's a bigger one. KM, the first stream you've caught. Welcome, welcome. Oh, you were hanging out back in the old Ask GSG days. Yeah, welcome. Do this every Wednesday for most of the year. But yeah, there's no specific question typed out there besides that one. So let's go back to Twitch, where Mick has a question. How would you go about creating these separate textured pieces of a Voronoi cut? Let's see what we've got. PNG, abstract rhombus shape. Cute. Looks like this is somebody's, oh, it's 3D. PNG? How is it spinnable if it's a PNG? I'm confused. But this looks like it might be somebody's like stock photography type of thing, so we don't want to reference this too much to step on their toes. But how would you go about creating separate textured pieces of a Voronoi cut? Yeah, so that doesn't have very much to do with this, but specifically, does it say who made this? I just want to do It's very... Oh, made by Arcs Academy and Elizabeth Soloveva Viva. But yeah, they got a whole collection of these. So, very nice looking. So, yeah, texturing them separately. I doubt you could do it parametrically, but nothing about that is requiring it to be parametric. So, let's do it with some text. It still trips me up that they moved the mo text into the main geometry tab and they just called it text. It makes sense to me, but it's very unintuitive where it's like I want to reach for a mo text, and that's not where it is. So I'll go with my new favorite lemon milk bold. We'll go with my favorite ampersand, which is just a good go-to. We got something pretty beefy now. That gets fed into a Voronoi. I guess they've got theirs very rounded and blobbed, which is cool. What would be my process for doing perfectly? I mean, we can bevel them after the fact, I suppose. That might just be what's happening. So anyway, into a Voronoi fracture. It's going to randomly be chopping them up just fine. And I'm fine with them having these extra random chunks. And we can put a little separation if we wanted by offsetting the fragments. So a little bit of spacing goes a long way. And we could evenly subdivide them, somewhat evenly subdivide, by going under detailing and enable detailing. And if you hit NB, you'll see that a major thing that happens when you enable detailing is it subdivides everything. A couple things we should do. You see all those extra subdivisions there? Don't want those. So let's simplify by dropping the angle to like 15 degrees. You see those don't have quite so many subdivisions. And I mean, we could probably go higher. And then these, oh yeah, and so this has all this extra like detail it's putting inside. But if we say a maximum edge, maximum edge length is the distance, but we want there to be no noise. So I'll say noise strength 0. And now it's just a subdivision. So it's not very even subdivision. And I don't think there's any sort of... Yeah, there's no sort of cleanup here. There's no quads or anything. So let's make these not as detailed. So I'll jump to 20. You see there's more subdivisions. They're relatively even. They're not super even. One thought was to throw that into a subdivision surface like so. And now everything's pretty rounded. But yeah, you're going to get this pinching, which is what I was expecting. So the alternative is don't enable detailing, and let's see if bevel will do anything for us. So we're asking a lot of it in this circumstance, but putting that into a null, put the bevel inside, and everything is getting beveled. And yeah, we're asking a lot of that bevel. It's already got good settings because they changed the defaults, so it's already limited and using angle from the default. But yeah, that kind of explodes outward. Am I just... I feel like there should be a really straightforward way of making those all work. But maybe that this is not done with a Voronoi. In fact, if we look at a couple of their others, I'm curious if this is a Voronoi effect. Oh yeah, look, well, that's kind of got a curve. But you know what? I'm thinking that these are not. I'm starting to think that these aren't Voronoi. I'm starting to think that these are balloons inside of a shape. So I'm going to shift gears. We've now got this geometry. I would like it to be extra thick. So we'll jump that up to 30. Yeah, we'll do 40. Why not? And I don't want the caps, or I want the caps to be quads, so that will subdivide there. And you see it's very clean, very evenly distributed. And I think we need to fill this up with bubbles, with different balloons. It's actually not super difficult to do this. If you're doing an animation that can slow you down, still doable. But let's draw a shape here. So I'm going to... It doesn't have to be too perfect. I'm going to attempt to follow this arc relatively cleanly. Hit escape and then draw another little section. Hit escape, draw another little section. Hit escape. It's all one spline, but you see I made it from multiple segments. And that will enable me to create something like a cube, possibly a sphere. I think a sphere is a best idea. We'll do our nice triangulated icosahedron. Set those pretty small, like even that's probably too big. So I'm going to say 5, so very small. Put that into a cloner. Clone onto an object. Object will be an object, which will be the spline. So now we've got a count, but if we say don't do a count, do it evenly and not per segment. So it's an absolute, actually, yeah, step. That's what I want. So we're going to do it based on a step. So if I say I want one of these every 25 units, you can see that we've now got pretty evenly spaced all over the place. Now these cross over each other, so I don't mind there being some extra. We might need more, we might need less. But I think that's pretty good. Scooting this text forward from the top view. Actually, we can move that exactly 20. So it's at the halfway point. Cool. Now the text, I want to be able to see it, but not all the time. So under, I think it's under render tags, display, use lines. So now that will show us the outline of that. It becomes a collider body. So simulation collider body, make sure that it is set to static mesh, which it is. And then we've got these individual spheres. Those should become simulation soft bodies. Turn off gravity, Control D, dynamics, gravity, 0. And yeah, so there we go. That's the basis of this. Let's save the file to and inflate fill text textures. Save. Okay. So yeah, there we go. Now the only thing left to do, they're all soft bodies, but if I can hit one frame forward just to make sure, and yeah, everything seems okay. You see those kind of wiggled a little bit, but not too much. Actually, I'm not sure why they're inflating so much. It's fine that they are. I'm just surprised they are. Anyway, inside of soft body, the singular most important variable here is our rest length. So if we keyframe rest length, what we want to do is over the course of some number of frames, and I will say 15. Over the course of 15 frames, I would like these to inflate to, let's just say 3 times their size. So doing that, I think it's relatively safe to hit play, but if it starts exploding, I'm going to pause it immediately, or actually I'm going to hit render immediately. So these should start inflating, and they're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you see, yeah, that worked quite nicely. It's just not quite enough space. Either we need more of them or they have to inflate more. So inflating more is my choice. So let's go up to 500 is my guess. Back to 0. Hit play. There seem to be inside of some sort of tolerance at the beginning where they're really, really small. And that's why it's going really slow in the beginning. But you'll see it actually speeds up after it gets past that because they're not colliding with each other's margin anymore. So let's see. Yeah, I think we got a pretty good size here overall. And now we see these inflating. We are now at the maximum, so nothing's going to happen from here on out. And we've filled up the space pretty well. Now, this is not super huge. I mean, that's a cube, so we're smaller than that. You will see that they're a little bit away from the surface there, and that's going to be from mostly our under our dynamics. There's a collision margin of 1. That is probably most of that being taken into account. I'm not going to worry about it for now. It looks fine. But anyway, these are now baked and collapsing here. They do squish down a little bit right there. I don't want that to happen, so let's try adding more pressure in. So I'm going to give it a pressure of, I don't know, 10. So let's run that again. That's still poking out. Let's do, that's volume conservation. I'm going to do 10 times as much pressure. I wonder if I scale them up more. If I scale them up more, then it's going to change the end scale, which is already pretty good. So I'm fine dealing with these first couple frames where they're colliding a bit. Maybe we can just shrink the collision margin a bit. I'm still surprised that this little bit is popping out. Anyway, I will shrink the collision margin to half their size, 0.5. Let's see. Yeah, see, they don't freak out in the beginning anymore because they're not colliding with themselves. But yeah, that fills up nicely. We're going to slightly overinflate, which I'm completely fine with. And yeah, so then that puts it in their final state right there. You still want that little bit of space in between. But yeah, now that they are doing that, we can feed that into a subdivision surface. And we don't have to set up too much. But now, look, we're pretty much getting exactly those rounded shapes that we saw in the reference. So you get these different ones. They are still, you know, we got those little shapes poking out on a lot of them. That's throwing me off. I wonder why that is. And I thought with all this pressure, I want to do a couple experiments because we just need to gain knowledge here. So pulling this out entirely and turning off the text, we can just let this one inflate. And yeah, we see it is behaving like it can handle that. Now, let's experiment with putting extra pressure in there. Let's say 1,000. And yeah, you see it kind of inflated it more, so I think it's doing something. We could try some volume conservation. Oh yeah, that's actually, the volume conservation does not scale up with it, so it is not able to push beyond. So we don't want volume conservation. Can you go negative on that? No, I didn't think so. Stiffness is going to try and keep it smaller, so we don't want that. Flexion is the ability for it to bend. I guess we could go easier on that, like say, hey, you don't want to bend, so that's, you know, if they have to, they will, but they don't want to. So there we simplified that to do a test. That can go back into the cloner. Don't turn on the subdivision while it's running. That can mess things up. Hit play. Those reinflate. And let's see if we are combating. It does look like the tweaks I just made are combating whatever those little divots were. Keep in mind, the more you subdivide this object, the more it can kind of take on the proper the contours of each other and the object. Of course, the much slower it will begin to run. And yeah, very, very important to note. Potentially, these would be better looking shapes as well if they were quads, which right now they're not. But turning on the subdivision surface, we can see that we do get that nice final rounded out mesh, hiding the text entirely. We're filling in those various shapes. I guess there's still a divot, but it's better overall. They're still not that smooth. I wonder if we drop the poly count a bit. So if I do lower that down to the next level, if there's fewer polygons, then overall we get better smoothness. They'll still fill up pretty nicely. And it runs quicker, so that advantage as well. And then if we smooth those out, do they have, yeah, they do have more smoothness in general. But I can't help but feel it would be looking better if they were all quads. So I wonder if we can get away with that. Let's try making a cube. Our radius is currently 5, so we'll set this to 10 by 10 by 10. Swap that in, copy the dynamics tag, and subdivide these a couple times, not much. Let's start with 3 by 3. And make sure we don't want any intersecting, and you see those, I think they are intersecting. So on the cloner, I will say don't loop. And I could scoot that back manually, which is probably the best bet. So just selecting that point, I'll just scoot that away. I still want it here. I'll just move it there. Just don't want it intersecting. Okay, so not many changes, but they're all quads now. And let's see what those do. Blurp. Getting a little twitchy. We might, you gotta be careful not to overinflate. And I wonder if these, oh wait, I was actually weakening those by decreasing it. Now that I think about it. I wonder if we, let's go way higher on them. Say, no, I don't want to bend. They're still collapsing in, but these cubes might be larger in general, so let's just keep that in mind. So if we're trying to force them into a space that they just simply cannot fit, then I would kind of expect that collapsing. So we just had to find that right balance. And yeah, now by not letting them overinflate, you see they seem to have done a slightly better job. And the hope is, yeah, if we round these out now, they are doing they look smoother because quads are just going to smooth better. So let's let them take on their shapes a little bit better. Let's do 4 by 4 by 4. And yeah, they got all that spacing in between. So I kind of want to change that. But it's only 0.5. It felt like they had a lot of spacing in between. But let's find out. Burp. And I honestly kind of inclined not to let them go too far. Some are escaping now because of the extra forces involved. And these smaller margins. So I will increase our steps per frame because it's running pretty quick. Boing, 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 boing. So yeah, we could stop that pretty quickly where they're now filling out that space. Overall, looks pretty good. Smooth them out. And yeah, now we're getting nice, smooth shapes that are really filling up the overall spacing. And keep in mind, we could layer up extra ones and throw in some monkey wrenches in particular spots. We could let these soften up, put some turbulences in. There's a lot of ways of getting some extra variation, but I'm thinking that something like this is happening to create those original shapes. So having done that, you could make a lot more of them that are smaller to fill in the space, which could be fun, but it would go slower. And the more subdivisions that we put in here, the more that they will take on kind of each other's shape. They're doing a pretty good job, and I'm fine continuing from here. So let's just keep that in mind. Somebody actually mentioned the multi-shader. So I do wonder if we could texture these without breaking the look. But the multi-shader doesn't... You can't feed in more than one material. You can just feed in more different images. Right? Maybe... Is there any way? I don't know. It's honestly not something I'm an expert in. I feel like somebody else might just have... Yeah, see, that's why I say turn off the subdivision surface. It doesn't refresh properly in the viewport while it's on. But yeah, we can let these inflate. We could bake the dynamics down, which may be a good idea. You know, it might help as well, just as a tiny thing. Let's randomize the rotation. That just might make them look a little less uniform. 90, 90, 90. That intersection will create problems because they are already intersecting. They don't fix them. The soft bodies don't fix themselves in that type of scenario. That's fine. I'll just scoot that down. I just want to see how they handle the new rotations. Yeah, I guess they mostly straighten themselves out. Let's do a lot of friction. That could be fun. Friction. I mean, there's already a lot, but let's do like a lot. Yeah, definitely a difference. Now, a couple things. I'm curious about baking these down. The friction seems to have several variables here. I'm going to say that they're free to slide on the outer surface. So we'll lower that down. Better. But yeah, I guess they're still overinflating a bit because they start collapsing in. It's minor. 350. Anyway, something I'm curious about would be if we do have the ability to, you never know if you make something editable. Let's go one more frame forward. Can I just make that editable? See, I didn't think so. Once you make something editable, it's going to be like, no, I can't do that. And it doesn't work. So hitting undo, I will attempt to turn off the subdivision surface. And let's just bake the dynamics. And we only need to go up to frame 15. So it should be quick. Control D, dynamics, cache, bake. So now it's baking all of the tags simultaneously. And now that those are baked, I can scrub, which is nice, but there's also a chance now that if we make it editable, it will be able to, but not guaranteed. And no, it did not like that either. If we hit undo, yeah, unfortunately hitting undo, I think will break the cache. No, it's just a subdivision surface that's breaking the cache. If we feed that into a connect object, don't weld, can it handle that? Kind of doubtful there. Yeah, this is always that problem with baking down caches. Like, it can be decently tricky. Clear. If we make it editable ahead of time, I'll add a recall tag on that and store it. And if we make this editable and hit go, like, that actually might make the difference. I can't remember though. Bake. All right, so we are, I'll go to frame 14, it looks better. Connect, and yeah, that works. So we had to make it editable first, and then it has the ability to bake down. It's a weird little quirk. But yeah, so that is filling up the space pretty nicely. We could have subdivided, as I said, more, but that is now, it's now been made editable if you wanted to make it editable. And then throwing in a smoothing could be good, could be bad. A little smoothing goes a long way. So yeah, so this is no smoothing, and here's just a little bit of smoothing, which can, you know, help round those out just a hair, which I do think looks a little bit better. There seems to be some sort of Phong issue going on. So I'm going to say don't use Phong break edges, and now it's all smoothed out even more. Anyway, we were talking about the shaders, and yeah, Zach is talking about the Redshift shader switch, which is a thing. Paul is asking what the reference is, and that is going back here to this image or images from Arcs Academy and Elizaveta. So I am curious if there's anything we can do in vanilla cinema. Now, we did make it editable, which I guess in a way is a bad thing, right? Let's go back to it not being editable. Yeah, so we can go back here and bake it again. Now, these are in a cloner, so there is a thought that we can use a regular MoGraph multi shader. So let's go into the luminance channel and feed in a MoGraph multi shader, potentially. And the multi shader is neat, where you can feed in a bunch of different images, and this could be very well be a way of doing it. But to start out with, let's just do one is a color and the other is a different color. So we'll just start out. Actually, we'll add one more. Okay, so we got 3 different colors, and this is based on a multi-shader, and it's currently looking at the color brightness, but we could just say the index ratio. And as soon as I do index ratio, you can now see that it is going to be going and saying 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. I would think it would be, but I'm not sure what the point order is on them. So you can see that they are not, well, I mean, they're seemingly decently random, but there's definitely some clumping up of the individual colors. If we added enough different things, I think it would work, especially if we added exactly the number, and then each one would have to get something unique. But that's just based off the index. We could also, and now that based on these, we could feed in whatever. Like one of these could have a gradient, and one of them, let's hit undo and hit add. That one will have a gradient. This one can have a noise, and we can just keep on feeding in more and more and more variety into them and seeing different things as they would get distributed. So yeah, this would be an entirely, we didn't make the hierarchy editable, and you can start texturing them individually however you want to. So that is using the vanilla cinema stuff. That is using the index ratio. We could, of course, I'll delete that temporarily, and inside of the cloner, feed in something like a step effector, or we could randomize, but as a way of visualizing, if I put in a step effector into this cloner and say, yeah, it's doing the random, that's fine, but the step effector, I want to show the color. So step will affect the color. There we go. So now you can see that we have presumably 1, 2, or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 is what is going on there. So yeah, so essentially that's what's already happening, but this is just a way of visualizing it here in the viewport. And the order of them, you could randomize the order because that's the step, but I could say, hey, the random effector that's already fed in, let's have that affect the color, and I can see it's randomly assigning different colors to them. And that we could do that in such a way that it makes a black and white setup. I think if we make it black and turn on step, or yeah, use alpha, so now they're randomly from black to white. In fact, it's actually beyond that. It's doubly dark. I guess it's baked, so I can pull this minimum up to 0, and now you see it's randomly assigning anywhere from white, every grayscale in between, all the way up to black. So this is randomly assigning them. And now that they've been randomly assigned a color, now if we apply this material, they should, that's based on their index, but we can say based on the color brightness, and now that is based on the random. And now we can see that the pattern is a little bit, it is more random, which is good. And that is now based on this random seed. So if I do different seeds, you'll see I get different layouts. So you could try and find the one that doesn't overlap. But of course, well, these aren't different materials. Now, just throwing it out there, the at the state that we're in, this would be the way to do it in Vanilla Cinema. Keep in mind, though, that we already were talking about that we could totally just make this editable. So if I do indeed make this editable, I used a connect object, which baked it all down, but I could say, hey, select all those and mesh conversion polygon groups to objects. So that's going to explode this into a series of different, every group became its own object. So each one of these is a different object to get textured. And the subdivision surface can still run on it and smooth them. So this one's empty, so that does nothing. But all of these, actually, I'll just middle mouse button to select children, deselect, pull out, and delete the empty one. So from here, you can just apply whatever material you want. First of all, these Phong tags, stop using edge breaks, please. And you just feed in materials. I don't have, we could make a whole bunch ourselves, but if you have any kind of material library or collection on your own, I mean, first of all, we do have the asset browser, which is awesome. And let's see what we got. They've got a material section. We'll go in there. 2D, ceramic, concrete. They got a bunch of different ones, so we could potentially use the different ones that they have. So these are provided by Cinema now. And you probably have some in the older content browser, but we could, let's go and download a couple. Yeah, so that's now downloaded. And we'll download that one and that one. Yeah, with all these images, I guess they take a little bit of time. Oh yeah, it's like, that's 40 megs by itself, but now we've got those two. And then let's see what else we got. There's ceramic. Let's grab this clay, because why not? And sports balls. Why not? Let's grab a basketball. But anyway, the point being is if you do have a bunch of materials already prepared, now that they're exploded out, this is as simple as just dragging it onto whichever objects you want to have that material. So there's not like much more to think about. They are all prepped. They're going to have good UVs because they're just cubes. They're going to be distorted and whatnot, of course, but you can see how we just apply different materials. And then I do have the Grayscale Gorilla Plus library. So if I were to open up the Plus, these are all Grayscale Gorilla materials that you have to be a member to get, but they're all downloaded, so it'd be really easy to select any of these. And here, the reason I thought of it is they do have things like tech products and whatnot as a category. So, you know, these all are going to look kind of cool and weird and abstract. I don't think I downloaded the really abstract one, but well, actually this one is pretty abstract. But yeah, so you see a lot of these materials definitely have the vibe of the imagery that we were seeing here. Like those very much feel similar to this type of vibe. So the idea of, well, these are, yeah, these are all the Redshift ones, but you know, Grayscale Gorilla you would download for all the different renderers, and I think Vanilla Cinema. But yeah, you could drag those in, but we have the different asset browsers and just drag them in individually. Now, I mean, I would love, does anybody know if there is a way of making an entire material be fed in and that this could have still been a cloner? That's what I don't know. I'll save this as the next version. Could this still be a cloner with the children and we apply the materials and they could individually be being fed in? Actually, I do have a way. It's silly. It's kind of silly that I didn't think of it immediately. Let's see if we can go back to this one. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable place. Okay, so I was being kind of silly because we could totally just select these, copy, and if we go back here, we can paste those back in, and we could just make as many of these original cubes as we want. So if we make 5 cubes, we can apply 5 materials. And now these could be in these very simplified states. But they're going to inflate in the exact same way, like these square basketballs. And let those inflate, and then they're each textured, but the entire hierarchy is entirely parametric. So yeah, there's options for sure. Round those out, and there you go. So yeah, pretty cool. That's as far as I'm going to go on that one. You see, once you kind of build that rig up once, then it's like, oh, it's really easy to go and make tweaks. But getting that initial setting and packing it up the exact way I wanted, we had to find the correct number. But yeah, Zach and Crossfader are both mentioning that with Redshift and probably several of the third-party renderers that there's things like the multi-shader. And I'm actually not too familiar with it, but if we went into, so if we were to make a material, you can output several materials. I think I know enough to at least pop it open and show you. Maybe not place it on the object. But we could make an entire material. And if we go under materials, I can bring an entire material in here. So here's one material. Here's a different material. And there should be a, would it be the material blender or, so there's a layer 1, layer 2. So that could be one, but is there a multi? I'm going to search for a multi. Yeah, multi-shader. So presumably here we could start feeding in, I'm not sure though. Those are shaders. Yeah, I'm not sure, but you can definitely take multiple ones and blend them out and spit them out. So I think every third-party renderer has something like that. But I just haven't specifically done it. But yeah, you might be able to treat, and then using the user data, we could take in the MoGraph, like color or the index ratio, and to feed that out as the output for it to be feeding into each one. Shader switch, apparently. Let's search for switch. I just haven't had a need to do this yet, so I definitely have not done it. But shader switch, and here we can feed in, presumably, do these accept entire materials? Yeah, okay, so you can feed an entire material in, and then output those, and then the shader selector would come from the user data, and this as a singular material could texture all of those. Maybe it goes in, I'm not sure what it feeds into. Do we not feed the user data in? I don't know, but I'm not going to go down that path right now. Okay, anyway, I'm going to move and look for the next question. You're wondering where the R24 store the downloaded data from the content browser. RBLX, if you're just asking about this asset browser, these exist on the cloud, like somewhere Maxon has servers, and all you're seeing is when you first, actually watch, when I very first click on something, let's click on leather. Do you see there's a split second as those images are popping in? That's because it is pinging the server. Let's click on synthetic. You see it, they're not downloaded right away. Wood, okay, I've gotten the wood before, so those are downloaded. But let's click on brick wall, and you see pop. That's checking Maxon. It's like, oh, I can send the image really cheap because these are going to be like 64 by 64, so they'll download really fast. But when you click to download, they are going to download off the Maxon server somewhere live, so they do not live on your computer. Once they're downloaded, I think there's a download folder somewhere. I don't know for sure. Maybe we could find it if we say copy to database, export. Yeah, maybe there's not a way of seeing where it is on the hard drive, but I think maybe in your preference folder, they are being stored inside there, but I'm not sure in what format. Let's see. Apparently, Sid's got a good question. Abstract bubble art, 324. What do we got here? Another perspective from Creative Photography Ideas Soap Bubble Tutorial. So this is a photographer talking about photo stuff. So presumably, oh, this is a, oh wait, this is hang on, this is an ad because I have YouTube Red or whatever they call it now, but not in Firefox. Skip ad. 324. Yeah, so you got all sorts of crazy. So this is like super duper macro photography of the surface of some bubbles. Yeah, this has to do with like thin films, which are very much based on math, and they are not easy. I suppose, well, I made a soap material, and we can go and look at how I built it. And I was looking at other references, but I did build it myself. But there's like different mathematical papers and whatnot. But in Redshift, I did make a bubble material, and I think it looks pretty good. So if I go to my Ricochet folder, into my C4D and no, under demo files. Here we go. Bubble projection. I don't think it's bubble projection, is it? Oh, it is. Oh yeah, because I'm projecting the background. That's why it's called bubble projection. Oh yeah, and I did this hair-based dust simulation, which was pretty fun. But really all I want here is my bubble material. So go away dust. Here's all these different bubbles, but I just need the one. And honestly, we just need the material itself. So that is just that. And some sort of environment. I'm just simplifying here for our own sanity. That seems to be a reflection. That can go away. That's doing nothing. That is an overall light. Lots of crazy redshift nonsense. But now I've got a single sphere. Whoa. Hang on. My camera's all... I'm in a complex camera rig. This entire thing was a quick projection mapping I set up. But anyway, let's make a nice tiny bubble and zoom up on it and see if it looks okay. Jump to 64 segments. And we could put some displacement on it, which we will, but let's pop open Redshift first. Go. Yeah, so that's the bubble material that I made. And does that make sense? Maybe. I feel like that, the way it's laying out is not quite what I was expecting, but let's deform it and see what it looks like. Null graph random dot deform. Please deform the points by 2, 2, 2. And currently it's random. I want noise based. There we go. So now, I'm not sure what the scale is. Pretty large. Scale 55%, 22%. There we go. So yeah, that starts deforming. I feel like something's not quite right on it though. Like these bands on the side aren't supposed to happen that way. Let's see what I did here. There are ramps. Maybe the ramps aren't getting mapped properly. But is there anything that I input that would be breaking it? But yeah, I've got different ramps feeding into ramping to different colors. And then here's a different fractal noise, which is going into a color correct, which is going into a color layer, which is going into a change range. And now you see I'm in these tiny little micro ranges of like 0.05 to 0.5, which then get fed into this ramp. And that's the colors of a bubble based on a mathematical paper. And then I'm not modifying it. And then that goes into the reflection color. Which then goes output. And then you can even see here, like these are other things I was experimenting with, combining it with different Fresnels and color corrections and blending it with a different material. It looks like I was able to simplify enough. And that's just glass. Well, it's the default of glass, but I probably changed the refraction to meet exactly what a soap bubble would do. 1.3. But yeah, I mean, I'm just not an expert on that stuff. It's very specific. It's very mathematical. Like there, you know, there's literal like crazy light refractive code involved in the type of stuff. Vanilla Cinema has a thin film shader that does a reasonable job of doing it. But those bands, something seems wrong on it. I'm not entirely sure what. But yeah, that's just kind of talking through it. But it's not a good thing that I can tackle. And then even looking at that, that seems more like, oh, I have to watch the video and do research, and maybe eventually I could kind of have something. And now everybody's saying, how do I do hair-based dust simulation? So yeah, that's I guess a slightly better question. I can tackle that from scratch. So let's do that. see if we can get something good from scratch, if I can have my memory work on what that was. Now, the dust could work in a bunch of ways. Let's keep it simple to start out. I'll create a sphere and we'll set it to all triangles. And what's our overall scene size? I mean, you know, here's a figure. So this is a fine size. So let's just put some hairs on the surface of this to begin with. So that won't render, but for now, let's say that we get some hairs going, which are under simulate. Hair, add hair. So we get the individual hairs. I'm going to have only 3 segments. I'm going to tell the hairs to render as guides. So there's only as many hairs as we see here. And that also gets the same subdivisions. These are polygon vertex, but I could say polygon area, and now it's randomly creating them. And we can say, because it's based on the polygon area, we can say that I want 920, and you see those get created based on the size of the guy here. 2 centimeters. Actually, that's pretty big. I think these can be pretty small. So let's say 0.5. So now we get really tiny hairs. Let's add an extra 0 on there. So now you can see we have all these tiny little ones. Then inside of the hair material, if we're going to make this look pretty, we're probably going to have to do redshift, but I don't think we're limited to redshift. It's just going to give us the best, like, depth of field and bokeh effects. So, so yeah, let's just immediately go down the redshift path. So, let me remember. Well, there's a couple things. One way I have done things is we could just leave this on the surface of the sphere and deform it. So we could, again, put a random effector inside, a random dot deform, and deform it. So we'll deform the points, and now you see that this will get all like stretchy and abstracted. But if we hide that original sphere, then now all those hairs are going to be filling up kind of like more randomized space. And the more we subdivide that, the more that can just fill up space randomly. And I think I actually did do some of that just to give it a good randomized initial state in that other render, 99, 99, 99. So yeah, you see those are spread out kind of nicely. The sphere itself could probably be smaller. So let's drop that to 22, a few extra segments. And yeah, you can start seeing how that starts getting, we get pretty nice. I'll highlight the hairs so we see them. You see, we've got pretty nice distribution here, considering it's just on a crazy piece of geometry. The pattern starts going away pretty well. Now, if I were to show you the sphere, it's going to look like nonsense, but we don't really care about that. We just care about this kind of randomized distribution of hairs. And we could keep it as simple as, well, I mean, we could keep it along those lines. If this is doing a nice enough distribution and they're moving slowly, we could set this to be noise-based and indexed. So now it's indexing each of those. Now, of course, as soon as you make this noise base, everything's a lot weaker. So let's make this, I don't know, 4 times stronger. You see those respread out. It's really hard to tell. So I'm going to hit, I don't believe I have them selected. So now you see it's super duper chaotic. But let's go under the deform and to animation noise. I'm going to say 1. Yeah, there we go. So just by typing in 1, look at that. We now have these hairs drifting around pretty randomly. So that's a nice solid non-dynamic rig. These just kind of are doing their thing. And, you know, looks pretty good. Not crazy. These do not need to be dynamic hairs, which they currently are. Let's say don't be dynamic. And now you can see that they're actually going to be on the rotation. Yeah, look at that. That's working really shockingly well. There could be some patterning that ends up happening where some of them are all on the same plane. But the more we subdivide that plane, let's double it again because everything's running quick. So yeah, I just doubled that again. So now these are very, very much randomized and they're going to be doing their own thing. So having done that, it's with the more subdivisions, I think we should slow it down more. 0.2. So yeah, look, now we just get these little hairs drifting around doing their own thing, which looks pretty good, like just for drifting. So very, very simple rig to just make these randomly move, just with a little deformation. And so I don't even think that we have to go full dynamic. Then it's still got this hair material. So I did leave it with a couple of subdivisions. So if I say frizz, let's just do like let's do 200% frizz if it lets it. Yeah. And can we go all the way to the base? Yeah. So we can crank this to be full power all the time. You can also add a bunch of kink in there, say full power, lots of power. So it's just really deforming those all over the place. And I think we could probably go to the editor and I want to see the actual hairs, and there's only the exact same number of them. So now I should be free to well, I can show all of them. It might start slowing down. But now we actually see those final hairs. And yeah, you can see how this is bent around. And then actually Redshift sees these hairs and these hair materials. So dust, I think, is tending to be a little bit more gray. So if we pull the saturation out from here, then those should work all right. And we might need like a lot more hairs to fill this up. I think everything's running pretty... Actually, with the individual hairs, is it safe to run forward? Yeah, it's slower doing it. I don't think that we actually have to see the... Let's just go back to guidelines. That should be running a lot quicker. Yeah. But I think we generate way more hairs, just fill this up even more blatantly. So... it's going to be a lot more. Boom. Okay, so tons of hairs being generated. I mean, look how quick this is running. It's pretty great. So now we got all these crazy individual hairs running. Let's save this as the next file. And of course, if you're supporting on Patreon, you get access to these scene files. Scene files 3A dust rig. I'm immediately going to save again because now we're moving into Redshift. So that one didn't require Redshift, but now we'll make it B_RS for Redshift dust rig. All right, cool. Now, first most important thing is we need some sort of light to be casting in the scene. So Redshift, lights, dome light. We can feed in any image in here, but just for the speed, I am going to use the HDRI link just to have that open library, but you should definitely go to, oh, dang it. Oh, HDRI Haven, which has like tons of awesome HDRs. I mean, the other one was my favorite, Derelict, so I'll start with that one because that one just seemed to work. Oh, I needed to link this. That's why it's called HDRI link. Okay, so that should be creating some illumination into the render settings, Redshift. We can go to advanced, and I do like this threshold mode under advanced. We've already got the globals turned on. All these defaults are really good overall. So now that dome light will show up, so we can open up our Redshift render view. And let's see what we get. Okay, right now, like, it's totally working, but we're getting all these crazy super thick hairs, and that's because Redshift is seeing the thickness of the hairs. So under thickness, these obviously need to be way down. So I'll say 0.01 to 0.01. Let's see what we get. Okay, maybe a little too thin. Okay, so now you can see that we're actually getting some, and then we can do variation, which is nice. So 0.05 and that as well. So we get some thicker ones and some thinner ones. In fact, we can probably say 0.01 again, and then some will randomly be thicker. Nope, I'm gonna keep them a little thicker because I want to see those. So now you can see them kind of floating around doing their thing, which looks cool. The brightness, I want these to catch the light, so I'm gonna go real bright on that. And then also the specular can go a long way here. I'm gonna put like a lot of strength on the specular because I want these to be popping out. And then the most, well, for dust, we've now got dust drifting around doing a fine job. Creating a camera, linking to it, going to Redshift, camera, bokeh, effects. I would like to target, I'll make a null, E, lock, move up on Y. Come on, yep, there we go, right in the middle of the head is the target zone. So camera, focus object, focus, and then let's tell this to enable override. So that should now be running. I think it's running. Yeah, we can already see a big difference there. And now cranking up the, oh, inside of the camera, if we start adding in shallower f-stops, if we start lowering that, then we're going to start getting more and more blur. And now you can see those starting to like completely blank out, and where they start disappearing into the space, we just can't see them at all. So you get that really, you know, so we now got depth of field going with these little dust elements. They kind of disappear, or if they're really close to the camera, you can see them blurred out. We can start going nuts, like 0.2 2, and now everything's blown out, and you only see these little bits of dust if they're perfectly in focus. 1, I think, is a good spot to stay in. And then, you know, this is with a lot of dust, but like already I think that's doing a pretty nice job of filling out the space. We could put a beam of light to catch the lighting on them a little bit more, to have some of them pop out more than others. Let's do that. I'll make a spotlight. Redshift spotlight. We do the old school. Well, it's gonna be hard to see here, so let's just manually do it. Down here on the ground, pull it up into the air, and I guess it's quick enough to rotate it right now. I'm gonna be aiming kind of in front of the character, pull this back, and not quite as much of a cone. And so that should be kind of a nice blast. Yeah, you can already see those getting caught in the beam of light. So the brighter we make this, the more that those are going to kind of like really catch the light as we go. So now let's go back to being close up on the character. But now some of those should be getting caught in the beam of light, and now you can really see some of those pop. So like we're doing that pretty extreme. If we chill it out now that we have some of those more popping out in the light, we can say, hey, let's go back to 5. So some of those will pop out more. But yeah, immediately you can see how those are doing a nice job of being in or out of focus. So having done that, why don't we just set this up for a very quick render? I think those should go relatively fast. All frames. No reason to save. Save that though. Render. Let's see how quickly a frame goes, and if it's slow, then we'll speed it up. That's not too bad. And I think that they're still drifting around, so let's give it a few frames and see how they drift. But they'll drift in and out of focus, and this is like an excessive amount. This is so much dust, but if we dropped it by a 0, it would calm down. In fact, I ended up doing... I had that entire bubble rendered out. Let me open up a new folder. I had that entire bubble rendered, and even though I loved the dust effect that I got, it was like way too much. The focus was supposed to be ricochet in the bubble, and instead there was so much dust that was distracting. Let me find it. Ricochet marketing, renders, soap bubbles, old. Nope, it's not in old. No, it looks like I might have killed off the super dusty one. But anyway, here's the actual soap bubble render where you can see how similar this is. You see these little flecks of dust drifting around. I think I did end up disconnecting those, and actually we will do that. The next step where we can disconnect these, and they won't be following the geometry anymore. They'll just be drifting on the wind that we set. But yeah, that's the bubble. And yeah, here, look, you don't see those bands in the bubble. So I think something broke in that scene file. I'd have to take a look at it, because this, look how much more iridescent that this is. And the bands aren't there. So something changed that I should probably go and try and fix. But let's scrub here. Yeah, it's really slow. But yeah, look at the dust moving around. It's so simple to set that up too. Like, and we have so much variation we could do. If I made a couple different rigs or a couple different materials, we'd have like different types of dust or different, you know, long or short. But when they're all out of focus here, like it just becomes these tiny little bokeh effects. And yeah, they're just drifting around doing their thing. And like I said, there could be some, like, you know, a bunch of these are existing on the surface of a polygon. So maybe you could see some consistency, but it's running in real time in the viewport, and it's rendering really quick here. And this is with all sorts of crazy depth of field and whatnot. And we have nice drifting dust. And we actually are in focus. They have more detail than just a dot, because it's actually a line. So it's more like a little hair or a speck. And we didn't even, you know, that's still rendering, but you know, inside this material as well, we could tell the individual hairs, like here's the length of them. So we could do a 100% variation on the length. You could also grab the scale and do a 100% variation on the scale. So you get extra long ones and extra short ones. So lots of combinations you could do just by tweaking these hair materials. And hair just runs really quickly in cinema, depending on what you're doing. So it would be even quicker if we gave it less subdivisions. But you know, I kind of like the idea of up close. You can see like that one right there, where there's like a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it, because it's a line. So yeah, simple dust. So yeah, that is that. I guess we can let that keep rendering. But as a, I'll save that, but as a final step here, and I might simplify a bit. Definitely will simplify. So that's all animating around. I'm going to say for this variant, we'll give no animation speed. So that is no longer moving. And just to keep our sanity, I'll drop this to 1/10 the amount. So there's a lot fewer. And then save this immediately as C. And this time, we're going to disconnect them. So currently they are on this crazy mesh that's all intersecting itself, but we're going to decouple it from that mesh. So we can do that via, how do we do it? Hairs, you select your hair object, you go to simulate hair edit, unroot guides. So you click on that, they're all going to turn green, and that means they're not connected to anything. They don't know where to go, which, you know, is potentially dangerous. But if we go back into the dynamics, currently dynamics are turned off, but now I think we can turn them on. So we say yes, on, and then under animate modifiers, nope. Oh, forces. Okay, under forces, now you can see that there is gravity. If you want these drifting around, presumably you don't want any gravity. And then we can include force objects, so it's going to be seeing them by default. Now, let's just be careful. Let's save. And let's go 1 frame forward just to be sure. Okay, doesn't seem... Okay, it runs quick. Let's put the gravity back in. And okay, seems safe. Nothing's happening on them. So dynamics are on. Don't worry about collisions. Fixed. I'm going to turn off fixed roots. And then there might be root hold as well. See this hold roots? I'm going to say no, don't hold roots. There we go. Okay, also turn off your hold roots. So now it doesn't care about them being held. And now you see gravity is just like yanking them out of the sky. So back to forces. Don't worry about gravity. If I play, pretty much nothing should happen. Yeah, so nothing happens. And then feed in a simulate forces field force. Or even, you know what, let's keep it simple. Let's just make a turbulence. Simple turbulence. It's a pretty small scene. The character's small, so I'll make that relatively small. I'll leave the strength pretty low. I'll select the hairs so we can see them highlighted. And now if we hit play, look at them blowing around based on the turbulence. So they're now disconnected entirely from that geometry. And this turbulence is pretty strong. So let's do a strength of 1, but even that is going to be additive, and there's nothing draining energy out from them. And I'm not sure, but inside of the dynamics, we do have like a drag. So let's see if that actually has an effect here. So if I, oh, okay, it totally does. So we can put a drag speed in here. If I say a drag speed of, I mean, this is a different system, so I don't expect it to behave consistently with the other ones. So like this drag of 25 seems to be enough to constantly slow it down. So now they're just drifting, doing their own thing based on the size of this noise. If I, and actually just to show you, if we crank this scale up really big and I select the hairs, we should see a lot of uniformity. Do you see how they're kind of all feel like they're moving the same way? I'll speed it up a little so we can see it blatantly. So yeah, you see how they're all kind of undulating in a very similar way. And then if we go into turbulence and we make it relatively small, still big, and I select those hairs, now there's uniformity, but they definitely aren't all doing the same thing. And then back into turbulence, I'll make a really small one. That's pretty small. And go back to hair. And now you'll see that each of them pretty much seems to be moving independently because we're at a very small scale there. And so that's why you'll tend to see me make more than one. So I'll make a large and a small. So that's our small one. And here's our large one. And if we make the large, I don't want it too large, so I'll put it back to that kind of medium one. So now by combining those two, we now have some overall uniformity where it feels like there's a gust that might be affecting them together, but then there's also a small one that's independently moving them from each other. And I might make each of them a little bit weaker and weaker and weaker as I get down to the individual. Because here we could even go like super large and make that one like super big. And that one can be 3. And then this one will be 2. And then that one will be 1. So now we should get like an overall vibe where they're all sort of doing the same thing, but then they're also kind of on the medium scale together, and then on the individual scale also moving separately. So yeah, that's just how I like combining these types of things. So yeah, this is a completely randomized version of letting these drift around doing their own thing. And yeah, just more dust, and it's just generated from the hairs. So even here, you would have the ability to like regrow new ones. It would probably have to get unrooted again. Actually, that's sort of a question I have. I'm gonna hit save there because it's a fun file for people to work from. But if I were to, let's say, add another 0 on there, now we have a whole bunch more, but they're not unrooted. But we did say root hold 0. So are they stuck? Are they stuck? I'm going to say yes, they are stuck. You do have to do that unstick thing because these other, if I look at those, yeah, you see that one right there? It's stuck to its original position. So you not only need the root hold, but you also need to, say, simulate hair edit unroot guides. They all get unrooted. And it's going to be slower now, but they're now all free to float around because they're not connected to that geometry anymore. So yeah, that is a simple way and a more advanced way of using hairs to pretty easily and quickly generate. No, don't stop. I just want to open it. Where to put the picture viewer? I think I don't see it. Window, picture viewer. There it is. Okay, it's almost done rendering. So, and this was rendering that whole time as well. But yeah, check out that dust. It's pretty good. There might be more to do. I'm not an expert on that stuff, but that's just a rig I put together like in 10 minutes when I needed some dust in the render, and I'm quite pleased with it. I should probably record that as a standalone tutorial, but I dig it. I dig it. All right. Yeah, that was a good one. It's funny that one question died and then it spawned into a good one. Let's see. I just want to catch up and see what anybody's talking about. It'd be good to have God rays. Yeah, I mean, I just made one beam, and I don't know if there's an official, like, a God ray setting or anything, or that would just be a series of spotlights or something. But yeah, a beam of light goes a long way here. And it'd be even better if there was a couple of independent beams, because we do see the bright ones that stand out, and a bright one will, like, show up really well. But, and then... does no one still use micro floaties? I don't know what that is, Sean. Yeah, don't have allergies in here. Would the dust interact with moving objects? Actually, that's a really good question, Mick. But it wouldn't have originally, but now you could, based on these being independent and floating around. So like this character, we could make them drift away. I did make a whole bunch more, so it's gonna be running way slower. But as a quick follow-up on there, and these tend to go really slow. Well, you know what? I'm gonna do it in the quick version. You could, actually I'll show you, but I'm not gonna hit play on it because I think it's gonna run crazy slow. But if we make a field force, and let's turn off those other ones so we don't even need to worry about them. So we have this field force. I could drag in this figure and tell the figure to be viewing it as a surface. And if we have the field force itself giving us a preview. Yeah, so you can see it right here next to the figure. It's very subtle. I'm going to crank up this distance like pretty much infinity. And now you can see that we got all these little tick marks in all these different directions. So now what this is essentially saying is push away from the figure. No matter where you are, push away from the figure. I mean, he's a relatively low poly mesh, so it's not going to run quick, but let's just do a frame or two and see if I can see the motion. I don't think it's going to freeze, so I'll hit play. Oop, nope, maybe it was a lot. I should get rid of a 0 on there. Okay, it did it, but it's taking a while, which is fine. Let's just get rid of a 0. I think they'll still be unrooted, yeah. So now that should run 10 times quicker. Let's see. So now the only force in here is the character, and you'll see everything's pushing away from where the body is. So everything's getting pushed away, but that field force wouldn't necessarily need to be going out very far. So let's increase this to 15, but we'll set the radius to be way smaller. So now it's only kind of near his body that would happen. And now hitting go. Now you can see the ones that are close to him are pushing away. So you could have something in the scene that it kind of has an effect of where it's moving, that it could be affecting things. And then there is even things I've tinkered with, that's something that could be neat, where things can travel along. What's the best way to do this? The figure is too complicated, but if I were to make something simple, let's just make a sphere. So I'll make a sphere. And we'll just, yeah, I want to make that visual. Delete the figure. The sphere isn't going to do any of the calculations, but it will be the basis of it. Add in a vibrate tag, position 333.2. And that should hopefully, yeah, it's going to move around at a decent speed, but not like crazy fast. We need more frames, 999. So that should hopefully be moving around kind of a centralized location. Not very centralized. Let's give it a different seed. Also, we'll do 111, 111, 111. Keep it a little bit more near the center. Better. T for scale. Okay, now add in a MoGraph tracer object. That's going to be tracing a bunch of lines. We don't really need it to have a bunch of lines. We could. It doesn't hurt anything, but I think it'll just run quicker if we say don't trace the vertices. So now there should be a single line on the sphere moving around. Okay, and then inside the field force, this point object is dead because we killed the figure, but making a spherical fall off, you'll see, it's a little hard to tell, but the spherical fall off is in the center point, and you'll see it's attracting all of the hairs. But we can say push it away, which is what I want. So spherical field, which is a child of the sphere now, zero out its PSR, so it's in the center, and it's got a radius, although it's not this. Oh, there it is. Okay, so now if I shrink this, I don't want it to be too much bigger than the sphere, but it's kind of like, oh, if you're near the sphere, it can get affected. That will have a direction. Don't invert the direction. So now, if they're nearby, it's going to push them away. So you see they kind of get scooted out as it just kind of drifts past. So cool, working well. Crank up the power of that a little bit, and then I don't know, the tail that I'm drawing on here, we could have it kind of do anything we want. So inside of that field force, let's drag in the tracer object, and that is currently set to a curve, which is going to look weird. I wish we could do this without selecting it, but right now everything's going to start moving around based on that curve because it's kind of infinite. But if I say that is based in not the curve, let's say these are additive as well. So I'm going to say that's not based on a curve, but based on the radius. There's now a radius around that, which is really small. It's 10, but let's make it pretty big, like 55. And I'm not sure. Yeah, it seems to, well, I'm not sure. Let's just select it and find out. Hair. Okay, so now you'll see it's actually attracting to that line. So attracting to the line could be what we want to do. Several things we should do to clean it up, though. First of all, well, that's good. I like that, but it needs to be weaker. So I'm going to set that to normal, put this above, and set that to add. I'm going to say, okay, doesn't need as much power. Actually, we could just have a full power under direction. We can weaken it via scale. So now it's like 25% of the power. And now you can see that it will get attracted, but kind of slowly. And then if we leave the tracer, or under, yeah, in the tracer, let's limit from start 11, from end, from 11. Now we get this little bit of a tail. Let's do 33. So now there's a tail that's constantly attracting things to that tail. So once it escapes that gravity well, then it's going to kind of give up on it. So that's kind of like this mild bit of attraction. So the sphere will push things away, and you know, potentially we can make that a bit bigger. So the sphere pushes things away. The tracer attracts them. Let's just see what that looks like. So yeah, so that pushes away. The tail, it's kind of like a draft, or you know, it's leaving that hole behind it. So like the air is getting sucked in behind it is kind of the idea I was going for there. And everything's getting pulled in. And now you start combining that with the overall turbulence so that those have the ability to start breaking apart again. And let's see what we end up with. Yeah, they are getting attracted, but now all those other forces are stopping them from perfectly aligning. And let's make the, I want the sphere to have more power, so let's put an extra 10 on there. Yeah, so those really get pushed away as the sphere forces its way through. So the point being is you could make it definitely have the impression that objects that you have in your scene may be, are like wafting the air and things are reacting to the air. And I don't think you'd have to get too complex to do this type of thing. Yeah, there's that tail. Everything's getting pulled slightly to the tail, but not so strong that it's super blatant. And yeah, just letting everything wander around and drift. So yeah, it can be really fun to start, you know, adding up all of those different all those different field forces layering them on top of the hairs. It just runs really quickly and is pretty dang parametric overall. So just for that, I mean, it's kind of it's pretty good particle system in cinema without being all those other crazy particles. We can pre-generate them and they can have additional properties. So yeah, pretty cool. I like it. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing quite well on time today. Yeah, Bobby's going to put dust everywhere from now. Yep, put some dust on some astronauts. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I can just clip this out from this episode and make it put it on as a tutorial. Yeah, MW, you missed a pretty good dust tutorial there. Add an animated noise in the turbulence fall off. I don't like adding fall offs in the turbulence, but you could. I would do it in the field forces, like just add in a random noise and let that animate, or even have more strength. Dust up, fish inside a sphere. Oh yeah. I mean, this is currently dust, but these could be like little flecks inside of water drifting around, also reacting to the sphere as if it's a fish or something. Let's see. Demi is asking, the cell noise vector field doesn't affect particles. Is that a cell noise vector field? What's a cell noise vector field? Is that something from X particles? Cell noise vector field doesn't affect particles moving in a random 90 degrees. Is there a way to make them move like the old pipe screensaver in Windows without code? I'm assuming you're asking that in the context of this dust. Okay? And I like the question. I'm not sure if it's I'm not entirely sure if I know what you mean. Let me save this first. Might as well save it as an animation. Save image as, save it as an animation, save that as an MP4. Options, custom. That's fine. It's probably going to save really dark. I've never really figured out the deal with that. I usually save it as a TIFF sequence. But that's kind of captured now. Is it? Did I set it to all frames? It did. All right, so I am not entirely sure if I know what you're talking about, but let's find out if I am. So let's say we wanted these to move very geometrically. How would we go about doing that? Well, my thought is we need to use some solid directions here. So I guess they might combine in more than one way, but here's a thought. If I just make a solid, this is now saying, hey, go up. That's what it's saying. So if I were to select the hair and hit go, there's also the turbulence, but in general, that's now pushing everything up, okay? So then I'm gonna say, you know what? I don't want this going everywhere. So let's set that to normal, and then I'll give it a mask, and that mask is where is actually going to affect things. So inside of that, I'll put a cinema random field and tell that to actually have an effect, set that to normal. It is noise based, and let's put it on probably, we can probably do cell noise, right? It's gonna be hard to visualize cell noise, but does everybody kind of have in your head what cell noise does? What I want to do is have it be crazy high contrast, but there's no contrast in the setting, but that doesn't mean we can't do it through remapping. So I'll put a curve, and let's pull that way up. And I think in general I want it to be pretty dark, and I'm not sure how large this is either. There's a lot of details we just don't have. But let's see what happens, and if visually we have enough feedback to know what's going on. So let's see. Yeah, well, you see some of them are moving up and other ones aren't at all. I think the noise is very large. So field scale 10% of what it just was, and let's check it out again. That I feel like that should have changed more. Cell noise. Space is based on the field. I'm going to set the space to global. Let's see if that's different. No, not so much. 1. Is there... it's not behaving the way I expect it to. The cell noise... I'm not sure what's going on there. It's really... I can't even see what's going on if I don't select it, but these are not at all moving the way I expect them to. Oh, you know what? Maybe they are moving the way I expect them to, but it is like an optical illusion. As I rotate around, they are actually kind of all over the place, but they felt so uniform. That's tricky. So yeah, only some of them are inside of that cloud, but there's cell noise, so I think at a certain point they'd stop. And we get some really weird patterning going. It's really hard to tell what their scale is. I feel like 10% is probably a solid number, and there's no animation speed. So anyway, the thought being, if we start layering this up several times, let's put another solid. We'll add that on top. This one is also masked randomly, but I'm going to give it a different random seed. And this solid is going to say, don't travel up, but instead travel on X. So let's see what that does. Well, I saw one stop, which is good. They don't go positive and negative, which I don't think I want them to. But we could make them go in both directions. And this is... I'm not entirely sure what you're looking for. But I thought this would be a neat visual. Maybe it won't be. We can make it go positive and negative from a single one, I think, by remapping to be able to go to a negative 100. And let's unclamp that just in case. So if I say that can go to negative 100 and I tell this, I randomized the seed. Okay, that makes some sense. I need 2 different random fields. I forgot that duplicating one wasn't going to do it. So those, when I randomized the seed, it randomized them both at the same time. Anyway, that's now a different random seed. They should do different things. And it's a duplicate of the same setting. So they should be pulling evenly. I don't think, I can select both, which is nice. Now that we're at the center point, because we're pushing hopefully positive and negative, I can split the difference right in the center. So now, let's see if nothing seems to go down. Actually, that makes sense. There's more to making something go both directions than just that, where we'd have to multiply that, put it on top of another solid that's going down, so half of it goes up, half of it goes down. I don't want to do all that. Definitely don't. But yeah, there's 2 different setups now, and you can definitely see, like, it's one, it might be traveling straight up, it might be traveling straight on X, and it might be doing both at the same time to do kind of a 45-degree angle. If we had these going in multiple directions, that could be good. But yeah, there's a very mechanical movement. And looking at it, I'm starting to think that the noise is quite small. So I'm making it larger. Yeah, if you watch any given one, and you might see it travels up, and then travels right, travels up, travels right, travels up, travels right. So the way it's combining with these is now giving them a very specific motion, but we don't get a lot of visual feedback from it. I could keep on repeating the rig over and over again, like if I duplicate this again. So let's do another. Can I copy paste? I don't think so, but I can hold down Control. So this one, I'm going to set that to be -1. And we'll have that also add. That needs its own random field with its own unique seed. And now there should be something pushing down as well. I'm going to turn this middle one off. So now we should just have up and down happening. So yeah, some go up, some go down, but they'll enter different zones and manipulate that way. So that's another way of combining them. So we can do each direction. So now we can also be going on Z, and depending on how and when they combine, you can get these very mechanical directions based on this noise. But I'm just not entirely sure. Oh, you vector. Oh, do you mean, it looks like Demi might have meant, I don't use that very often, but as a simplification, I think you're talking about the volume builder set to vector mode. I use it so infrequently, I forgot. I didn't even know that this is what you're talking about. But you can use this vector mode, and we can feed it directions. It's cool. The stuff it can do is really cool, but it's not the most intuitive thing. Oh, is that a random vector? I need a random field. That's not a random field, but I think we can change it. Yeah, so that's random directions. And then you're saying a cell noise vector. So yeah, it's cell noise. And the scale is real tiny. So yeah, as I increase it now, you can kind of see a visualization happening of kind of what I was just doing. It's very bizarre. Some of these in-betweens are throwing me off. The way it's visualizing those. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I see what you mean. So if we were to copy that into the dust rig, and let's just start from scratch. Turn off all of that. Don't need a tracer. Even the spotlight's not doing anything. So paste. So we get this. Now it's only going to happen inside of this physically. If I zero these out, good, it moves to 0. So we can now feed this volume builder into a field force. So simulate forces, field force. And now I can feed in the volume builder as a, I think as a volume object. So I can visually hide that. And now we should kind of see the same effect mirrored inside of here. So yeah, so you can see a very similar thing happening here, but it doesn't seem to, it seems to only be on the margins. It's translating quite literally in that same way. So I'm not even sure what to make of that. So if I hit play on there, what do we get? Yeah, they only seem to have an effect if they're actually in those little windows. I don't know what it's doing. If the vectors are end up being like perfect 90 degrees directional inside of it, then maybe it doesn't know what to do with them. I don't know how the transition works. And I don't use the volume builder in this way often enough. It does some cool things, like smoothing it out. And yeah, but even that doesn't give us a transition that I want. So yeah, I wish I could answer better, but I'm just not entirely sure. Upside, you're having an art block in 3D. Let's see. I mean, I don't know if I can have super great advice, because I mean, there's times where I'm just kind of like burnt out of like wanting to do 3D, and I'll just do like extra video games or something. But I tend not to get very bored in general. There's always something else to do. Like, I just find it inherently interesting and fun to learn and do new details, and just jumping onto like any website, you know, well, I mean, I find it personally pretty obnoxious to be on Twitter these days, because even though I only follow artists, it's nothing except for people selling their old daily renders. So I don't know. I've got weird opinions on that whole thing. But anyway, it can be real awkward these days, I think, for a lot of people, because there's a lot of pressure to sell yourself and sell your work, and you go online and all you see is people constantly pimping out their work and trying to, you know, I mean, there's so many weird terms that have entered the zeitgeist, like shill me your NFTs and things like that. So I think there's a very unhealthy headspace going on. It can be really good for some people, but there's an unhealthy headspace where you feel like you're always behind, or you always have to be chasing it. For the most part, I've chosen, you know what, I'm not going to engage on that. And I'm just going to do what I want to do and ignore all the rest of it. And it definitely, the 2 weeks where I was like kind of thinking about it was very, I don't know, kind of left a pit in my stomach. And I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to worry about it. And then everything went back to normal. And it made doing 3D fun again, where I think a lot of people are in constant stressed out mode right now. Now, if you're doing 3D for fun or 3D for work, those are two different things, obviously. I do sort of both, but I also enjoy and get to pick my projects for the most part. So but it goes to, I don't know, if you're spending a lot of time comparing yourself to other people, you're going to get frustrated. So you have to compare yourself to yourself. Like, are you better than you were a week ago? Are you better than you were a month ago? Are you better than you were a year ago? And that's always going to, you can be constantly improving there. There's always going to be other people who are doing like amazing work. And even the person who, like, maybe objectively, if you polled everybody, it's like, oh, that person's doing the best work, they're probably constantly like, oh, but look at this person, look at this thing, and look at this person's ability to make like a full-on animation where they're making stills, things like that. Like, you know, something that I find simultaneously, well, mostly inspiring, but maybe a little bit, not depressing is the right word, but almost like, I'm inspired by it, but I also can get slightly demotivated by it, which is you watch like Astartes, like the Warhammer animations that like a single person made, where it's almost movie quality animation, and it's great, and it's got like this amazing, almost like anime timing. It's so like inspiring, but at the same time, it's like, I don't think I could do that, or I would have to dedicate 100% of my time, and then ultimately I don't have an eye for that type of thing. Like mechanically, I could do some of it, but you can get lost in the weeds really easily. Let's see. I'm gonna see what Upside is saying. Yeah, every day's for a year. It's and you think it might have done more harm than good. Yeah, every day's. If you're doing an everyday, you gotta make sure that your everyday is for a purpose. If you're doing it every day and just posting it online, okay, here's a bottomless pit you can get in that would be like really that I do not think is healthy mentally. If your goal is to do an everyday and post it online and get likes and upvotes and comments every day, like that is a constant grind, and you are at that point you are training your brain to be on a treadmill looking for the next little dopamine hit. It's like going to a casino and pulling the handle on the slot machine again and again and again. If you've ever been in a casino, you'll often see there's people who are just sitting at the slot machine and they just have a blank stare and they're just pulling the handle again and again and again. And even when they win some money, they don't react anymore because they're just like, pull the handle. And so if you're doing that to yourself by making daily renders, then you're training yourself to like, oh, did it do better than yesterday? No, I'm a little bit upset now. Did it do it better? Like a month ago, I had one that got like unusually popular, and you try and make more things like that. And now you're comparing yourself to that one that just happened to hit perfectly. And you have to remember that all of these there are so many random variables involved in this. Like I'm on it less, but I pay a lot of attention to Reddit. It's the main place I get my daily internet from Reddit. And there are people who are like experts at posting on Reddit just to get a post, you know, any random post, a news article or something, where they post it and it's like, wow, this person is able to get things upvoted like all the time. Like, how do they do that? And it's like, oh no, but if you look behind the scenes, and like, I don't post like that, so I'm not comparing myself, but it's like, how do people get things to the front page? And you posted something, it's like, it didn't get there. Or you did it one time out of 100 and that got to the front page. But then you look at how people actually get to the front page, the people who are experts at that, and they will go and they'll have they're searching Reddit and the internet for cool little articles and details and GIFs and animations and who knows what. And then they'll go to these different subreddits and they'll post it. And then they'll cross-post it to 10 different places. And if it doesn't, in the like first 20 minutes, if it doesn't get like a certain number, if it doesn't get like 20 upvotes in the first 20 minutes, they delete it. And they now deleted a whole bunch of them, and they'll post it again an hour later on a different subreddit with a different title. And then maybe this time it gets 50, and it's like, okay, that one's going to take off now. But they post it again and again and again. So the same content over and over again, maybe with a tweak of a title, maybe just because it's a different time, maybe just because a couple of extra people logged in and hit the heart button at that exact moment, got it to bump up to the next tier of the algorithm, that then bumps it to the next tier of the algorithm, and now that one explodes. You essentially have no control over that. You don't know when something's going to take off, even if you have quality content. Somebody could make something amazing, and they post it one day, and it does terrible, and they post it a different day, it would do amazing. There's I actually, years ago, I used to, with a roommate of mine, we started a webcomic, and we made 80 strips, and I was pretty proud of them, and they were well, hand drawn. They were in Photoshop, but I would draw them with a Wacom pen, and so they weren't 3D at all. And we never got that much of an audience, but they were really fun. But there was one comic strip that we made, and somebody took it and then they posted it somewhere on some forum somewhere, and it kind of that one strip got really popular. And every once in a while, I'll actually see that comic strip get to the front page of Reddit. Like this thing I made, completely unrelated, years and years ago, it'll get to the front page of Reddit. But I have myself on occasion been like, oh, I'm going to try and post it. and see if it goes. And it just dies. It goes nowhere. And it's like, I literally made the comic, but it never goes anywhere when I post it, only when other people post it. So it's super weird. But the point being is, like, it's really dangerous to be on the treadmill, to train your brain to look for approval. And it's not, yeah, I'm not claiming that any one person is doing this or that anybody ever has the intent of doing it. But if you post something and you're checking the likes and the views and the new follows and everything you got, then that starts, you're training your brain that this is what it's looking for. You got to check that. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you're doing is checking to see if anything, like if anybody responded or any of that. That is a bad feedback loop. So posting things and kind of not caring if they go anywhere, I think is healthier. And at that point, start caring about your own work. Like only make things if you are distinctly interested in it, if you are learning new things by doing that. Posting every day, making an everyday. I don't like the idea of everydays. Like for certain people at a certain point in their career, they could be really helpful to just post every day. What I think is better is for people to focus, or you have a bigger project. Let's say you want to model a car. You cannot model a car in an everyday, because you just can't make any progress. But what you could do is, if you do want to post every day, is be like, hey, today I made progress on the rim. And then the next day you're working on the headlight. And the next day you're working on these different parts. Or you just, every day you're posting, it's like, oh, it's a little more refined, a little more refined, a little more refined. And then, you can make a big deal when you have the final render. But you could also be like, hey, I'm only posting when the project is complete. I'm going to post every Friday. And it's going to be a collection of all the progress that was made up to that point. But your goal here should be that you are happy with what you made, not that other people are happy with what you made. And yeah, Bobby is mentioning that it does good to do some cooking and reading or hiking. I agree. Exercise, all those different things. I'm actually pretty terrible at diversifying. I spend way too much time directly behind the computer, but I think I've calibrated my brain in such a way that I can do it. I don't know if it's healthy, but like I feel mentally healthy. But yeah, getting up and doing other things. I mean, I gotta say, like me and my brothers, that do Rocket Lasso, we start every morning by going for a walk. We go for a walk to start the day, just catching up, and then we end the day, most of the time, by going for a walk. And it's like, that's the start of the day, that's the end of the day. And even if you're I told a lot of people this, because at the different periods where I worked from home, it can be really dangerous to work from home. And I'm sure in the last year and a half, a lot of people end up working from home who weren't used to it, that your home life and your work life will blend together. And that means you're never really working, because maybe your roommate or your wife or your husband or somebody, even the dog, is coming in and distracting you. And then when you're done with work and it's like, oh, now it's time to go do something, but you might be, checking some emails or trying to respond, or, just working weird hours. That's really unhealthy. Like the most mentally unhealthy time of my life was when I was in this weird in-between time. This is actually going back to the beginning of Grayscale Gorilla, where when I was officially going to do Grayscale Gorilla full time, there was an office. A friend was building an office space, like an artist co-op, and we were supposed to move in there, but the construction kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. So when I thought I was only going to have like a couple of weeks in between where I was like working from home, I ended up having months and months. It was like 4 months of working from home. And because I kept on thinking it was like this temporary thing, I didn't develop any good work habits, and I was never quite working, but I was never quite not working, and it was really unhealthy. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Like single-handedly, that's the most mentally unhappy I ever was. Let's see. Let me go check Upside's comments again. Well, you're saying, getting clients if you're not popular on social media. I don't do a lot of client work, so I can't speak as a freelancer, but almost all the work I've ever done was not from social media. It was from doing meetups or doing actual work from a company, and that company now knows I do good work, and that company wants to call me again. Random clients from the internet, from social media, those don't sound very solid. They don't sound like they would be regular. And it sounds like it'd be a giant hassle to constantly lock in some new random client that might not pay, who's going to have completely new expectations. Getting a roster of people that you can trust sounds healthier in general. Just finding work from social media. Like this wasn't even a concept a few years ago, and I doubt that all work has turned into that. But like I said, I'm not in that world that much. But I mean, also keep in mind, like, you know, you're talking about like the daily grind of daily renders. But like I mentioned, Astartes, and they like post one animation, like they just drop a giant new cool animation once every like it takes months and months and months to have made one of the animations. I don't know if they have a social media presence, but the animation at the end of the day speaks for itself. So yeah, being consistent and getting things out there definitely helps. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be different. It's going to be literally different for every single person. But I'd also say you got to be careful that there's a danger that you are inherently here. You're saying you're not being fulfilled by your daily renders, but you think you need to do these daily renders for work. Well, are these renders for work, or are these renders for your own personal, like artistic satisfaction? Those are two different things. And just try and think of like other industries. Like if you're a lawyer, do you think you are getting like your artistic like satisfaction by going to work? Like that's not a thing. You're a paramedic, like that's not a thing. So very, very few things are you going to be able to say like, oh, I'm getting to tap into this very creative part of myself, be completely satisfied, and not even completely, but like have a solid amount of satisfaction from it, but also be getting paid for it. So I almost want to say that's a privileged position for us to whenever we get that, that's like a bonus. We can't expect that to be a regular thing. At the same time, us creating things and actually putting them out in the world, I think people creating things is one of the most satisfying things you can do. This is like old information, but where it goes to like construction workers are some of the most content people as far as job satisfaction is concerned, because they are making something. At the end of the day, they contributed, and at a certain point, it's like this giant project is done, and they can look at it. And I think that is a good framing device to do things. My first job ever was working in a grocery store, and I was stocking shelves. And every day you go in, and the shelves need to be stocked again. And then the next day, they have to be stocked again. You never feel like you're making progress. But if you're working on construction and you built something, if you paved a new road, that's done. That project is complete. So a daily render is more like stocking the shelves. You're stocking the shelf. Okay, cool. Next day. Oh, I guess I have to do it again. So for myself, if I felt like I was trapped there, I would try and focus a little bit more on larger projects, like something that is taking a longer amount of time, because you can still put out a cool project at the end of the day, and hopefully it can do well on social media if that's something that you think is important, or if it might help get work. But you'll have more satisfaction having completed something, where if you're doing it every day, you just got to do it every day. If you do a weekly project, you can take Saturday off. And it's like, okay, I work on these 6 days a week, and then Saturday I have off, and I've earned that. So yeah, a lot of combinations. I could just ramble forever on these types of topics, but just taking a break. I mean, I would just suggest taking a break as well. Like explore some other things. Make sure that this is the type of thing you want to do. And like, where do you actually get your satisfaction? And like I said, expecting work to satisfy you artistically, like those two things are not always, but are often in contradiction. So to expect them both to work, like it could be a framing device in your mind. Like think about it differently, and maybe those two things shouldn't overlap. But that's what I have to say about that. And that does put us over the time limit. I think everything is good. Tobias, as always, is on the ball for saying continue the conversation at rocketlasso.com/community, where we have a Slack channel where people help and answer questions for each other, do little contests, and it's a good place to go and just get advice and ask questions, answer questions. It's the main Slack channel that I'm in, and I answer questions about our plugins and in general, just kind of about anything that might pop up. And I announce the live streams and everything from there, so you can join the live channel from there. And I always add to the channel when this is going live so that you don't miss it. And I also have a special Patreon only stream. If you're supporting on Patreon, then you can do that. And at this point, it's, I guess, important for me to mention, if you like these live streams, if you like the tutorials I make, if you like the tools I make, and you want to get access to the scene files, all the scene files I just made today, then you can support on Patreon. And if you support Rocket Lasso, you get access to two whole bonus streams every week. Let me find a link here. You get access to 2 streams every week. the link. There it is. Aha. You get access to 2 entire bonus streams every week. You will get access to special models I release only there, and these scene files, the bonus streams, and almost most importantly, you get some discount codes for the plugins that we release. And we've already started the beta. We have now officially started the beta for the next plugin, and we hope to be launching another beta in less than 2 weeks. So those will be overlapping. But anyway, it's going to be really crazy. And that's the best way to support me. The best way to support me is to buy a tool that's going to help you with your job. So that makes it so it's a win-win for everybody. But the second best way is just supporting on Patreon. So then more people are hanging out and getting the scene files. And yeah, it's good times all around. So that will do it today. I'll see the Patreon people tomorrow on the bonus stream. And that's going to wrap this one up. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one. And I'll see you in a week. Bye-bye.